Father Christmas was originally a Victorian English personification of Christmas and was based on earlier English folklore from the 15th century. Old Christmas, as he was known, was portrayed in Victorian times as a pagan-looking wizard in pictures with holly wreaths, mistletoe or ivy in his hair, a beard, long robes, sometimes carrying a staff and spreading cheer, often with a drink. Some believe that there may have been connections between Father Christmas and fertility cults or the Green Man, who was often depicted with a face surrounded by leaves. Some believe that Father Christmas evolved from the tradition of the Holly King, who battled with the Oak King each year, reflecting the changing seasonal cycles, with the Holly King in his power at the autumn equinox, and the Oak King who gained his power in the spring. In the novel Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, three spirits visited Scrooge, including the ghost of Christmas past, the ghost of Christmas present, and the ghost of Christmas yet to come. In the following passage from the book, Scrooge was commanded to look at the spirit of the ghost of Christmas present, and this is what he saw. It was clothed in one simple green robe, or mantle, bordered with white fur. This garment hung so loosely on the figure that its capacious breast was bare, as if disdaining to be warded or concealed by any artifice. Its feet, observable beneath the ample folds of the garment, were also bare, and on its head it wore no other covering than a holly wreath, set here and there with shining icicles. Its dark brown curls were long and free as its genial face, its sparkling eye, its open hand, its cheery voice, its unconstrained demeanour, and its joyful air. Girded round its middle was an antique scabbard, but no sword was in it, and the ancient sheath was eaten up with rust. Father Christmas was also depicted with symbols of Yule, such as the Yule Goat of Scandinavia and Northern Europe. It is thought that its popularity came from the Norse god Thor, who was drawn by two goats in his chariot. Yule was a festival celebrated by Germanic people, and nowadays it is observed beginning on winter solstice and had customs including the Yule log, Yule singing, and feasting. In his writings, J.R.R. Tolkien described a log-drawing festival of the Elves, which occurred in midwinter, most likely on the solstice, known as Turuhalme, and Tolkien wrote the following about this celebration, which involves storytelling and a crackling fire at the cottage of Lost Play. "'Twill be a fitting day," saith Lindo, "for the sports of the morning and the snow, and the gathering of the logs from the woods, and the songs and drinking of Turuhalme will leave us of right mood to listen to old tales beside this fire." And the company from Mar Vamwa Tir Lieva went into the snowy woods to bring back firewood on the sleighs. Never was the tail fire allowed to go out, or to die into grey ash, but on the eve of Turuhalme it sank always to a smaller blaze, until Turuhalme itself, when great logs were brought into the room of the tail fire, and being blessed by Lindo with ancient magic, roared and flared anew upon the hearth. I recently discovered that J.R.R. Tolkien wrote letters to his children signed by Father Christmas, talking about his adventures in Lapland with his reindeer, the elves, and a polar bear. Tolkien's letters were posthumously published in a book, Letters from Father Christmas, in 1976, and feature all the letters and paintings he sent to his 4 children from Father Christmas, beginning in 1920. The letters included characters such as his chief assistant, the polar bear, snow elves, gnomes, snowmen, cave bears, and goblins. According to these delightful letters, in 1936 Father Christmas was joined by many elves to live at his house and help with the packing, and an elf, Ilbreth, became his secretary, who could write in several alphabets, including Russian, Greek, runes, Arctic, Latin, and Elvish. In the line The Witch in the Wardrobe, written by C.S.Lewis and published in 1950, the appearance of Father Christmas was seen as a good omen and sign that the dark spell of Jardis, the White Witch, was fading. A spell that had cast Narnia into an endless winter with no Christmas. When Father Christmas finally managed to break on through into Narnia, he gave the children magical gifts which helped them in the battle against the witch. 2 gifts per child were given, and they were well crafted and magical tools. C.S.Lewis wrote the following in The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. Some of the pictures of Father Christmas in our world make him look only funny and jolly, but now that the children actually stood looking at him, they didn't find it quite like that. He was so big and so glad and so real that they all became quite still. They felt very glad, but also solemn. "I've come at last," said he. "She has kept me out for a long time, but I have got in at last. Aslan is on the move. The witch's magic is weakening." And Lucy felt that deep shiver of gladness that you only get if you're being solemn and still. Images of Father Christmas also featured symbols from the tradition of wassailing. This was the ancient practice of visiting orchards in cider-producing areas of England, where incantations and songs were offered to the trees in the hopes for a good harvest. This was traditionally performed on the 12th night of Christmas, and usually the ceremony involved a wassail king and queen who would lead the songs, and the queen would be lifted up into a bough of a tree, where she would place offerings of toast dipped in wassail cider from a cup as a gift to the tree spirits, followed by an incantation. Mummers' plays were an old tradition for Christmas in the UK and often performed out on the street. They were usually based on the legend of St. George and the Dragon, and the character of Father Christmas often appeared. Evidence of mummers or performers in disguise has been traced back to 1296, where the marriage of Edward I's daughter at Christmas included mummers in the court. The mythology of Father Christmas began to merge with the Santa Claus of America, who had grown up out of the legends of St. Nicholas, who was a real Christian bishop of the ancient Greek city of Myra. After the death of his parents, he distributed their wealth to the poor. In one story, it was said that he threw 3 bags of gold into a poor man's house to enable his daughters to have a dowry for their marriage and avoid a life of prostitution. It is also thought that the images of Santa were inspired by the Germanic god Odin, or Wodan, who was associated with the pagan midwinter celebration of Yule and led the wild hunt through the sky. He was a sorcerer, often depicted with a spear, a long beard, and his animal familiars. Santa Claus became popular in the USA and Canada, and his image was cemented by a Civil War cartoonist, Thomas Nast, who drew Santa Claus in January 1863 in a Union Army camp distributing presents. Santa eventually became depicted as living at the North Pole, where he made gifts for children with the help of his elves and delivered them across the world with his sleigh and flying reindeer. It is believed that this image was largely inspired by an anonymous poem from 1823 in which St. Nicholas was described as a jolly elf who was pulled in a sleigh by 8 tiny flying reindeer. Clement Clarke Moore later claimed authorship of this poem, called A Visit from St. Nicholas, which I will share at the end of the film. Although the first publication to mention Santa's sleigh and reindeer was an anonymous children's poem, Old Santa Claus with Much Delight, published 2 years before in 1821 in New York, which included illustrations by an unknown artist, and these depictions predate the images of Thomas Nast. These poems of flying reindeer may have been inspired by a deeper memory in the collective of the Sámi reindeer herders of North Scandinavia, who gave their reindeer psilocybin mushrooms, Amanita muscaria, and then drank their urine in shamanistic ceremonies in which they may have experienced a sense of flight. In 1894 to 1898, hundreds of Sámi people travelled to Alaska in the United States to teach the indigenous people there how to herd reindeer with sleds. The ensuing reindeer industry boomed, with some companies organising parades of reindeer pulling Santa Claus on a sleigh in order to sell reindeer meat and fur in the early 20th century. Eventually, Walt Disney and Coca-Cola adopted these images, gluing the relationship between Santa Claus, reindeer, and the North Pole. The image of elves in the workshop became popular after a publication of the American magazine Godey's Lady's Book, featuring Santa surrounded by elves making toys on its front cover in 1873. It is thought that the earliest accounts of elves appeared in Norse mythology, and in literature they first appeared as Christmas elves in 1850 in Louisa May Alcott's unpublished book. Elves have appeared as helpers in other folk tales, such as The Elves and the Shoemaker by the Brothers Grimm, yet it is not entirely known how they came about as Santa's helpers. Yet the types of elves described in mythology differ considerably. In Norse mythology they were associated with the gods and had supernatural powers and beauty, whereas towards the early modern period they were portrayed as smaller and impish, until finally they returned as human-sized beings in the Romantic period and in later literature such as Tolkien stories. I personally feel that there are many different types of elves which all fulfill different roles in this universe. Terence McKenna spoke about interacting with intelligent, self-transforming machine elves while on DMT, a chemical which is naturally occurring in plants and animals and consumed in a brew as plant medicine by some indigenous communities, inducing deeply mystical experiences. As Santa Claus grew popular in the UK, Father Christmas began to adopt his attributes, and by the late Victorian period his costume had changed and was invariably red. Eventually their roles began to blur until in the 20th century there seemed to be no longer any significant distinctions made between them, and modern dictionaries categorise the two terms as synonymous. I would like to finish this film with a poem written in 1823 by Clement Clarke Moore. 'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. The children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads. And Mamma in her kerchief and I in my cap had just settled our brains for a long winter's nap, when out on the lawn there arose such a clatter, I sprang from my bed to see what was the matter. Away to the window I flew like a flash, to open the shutters and threw up the sash. The moon on the breast of the new fallen snow gave a lustre of midday to objects below, when what to my wondering eyes did appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer, with a little old driver so lively and quick, I knew in a moment he must be St. Nick. More rapid than eagles his coursers they came, and he whistled and shouted and called them by name. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer and Vixen, on Comet, on Cupid, on Donner and Blitzen, to the top of the porch, to the top of the wall, now dash away all. as leaves that before the wild hurricane fly, when they meet with an obstacle, mount to the sky, so up to the housetop the coursers they flew, with the sleigh full of toys, and St. Nicholas too. And then in a twinkling I heard on the roof the prancing and pawing of each little hoof. As I drew in my head and was turning around, down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound. He was dressed all in fur from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. A bundle of toys he had flung on his back, and he looked like a pedlar just opening his pack. His eyes, how they twinkled, his dimples how merry, his cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry. His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the beard on his chin was as white as the snow. The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke it encircled his head like a wreath. He had a broad face and a little round belly that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him in spite of myself. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head soon gave me to know I had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work, and filled all the stockings, then turned with a jerk, and laying his finger aside of his nose, and giving a nod, up the chimney he rose. He sprang to his sleigh, to his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew like the down of a thistle. But I heard him exclaim, ere he drove out of sight, "Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night."